The first sign of trouble came during the comparative biology lecture. The room was packed as usual, rows of tiered seating curling up the circular auditorium, each one filled with students of vastly different species. The air smelled faintly of sterilized metal and something that resembled pickled ginger, courtesy of the Velar twins dripping condensation from their dorsal fins. In the center of it all, slouched over his desk with a hand pressed to his throat, sat Simon Velar. He was 27, human, a graduate student from Earth on a science and cultural exchange program at the Intergalactic University of Virilox Prime. He was also, at that exact moment, pretty sure his throat was staging a mutiny. Professor Zoln was midway through a lecture on multicellular regeneration. Now, observe the microfilamentation layer in the Karen lung sac. He paused mid-sentence, antennae curling toward Simon. Mr. Velar, are you producing internal frictional noise? Simon coughed, a dry, rasping sound that echoed through the amphitheater. His eyes watered. Yeah. Sorry, just a sore throat. The room froze. Vek, a tall, blue-furred student from the planet Rune, turned to him slowly, eyes wide and horrified. A sore throat. Simon nodded, wincing as he swallowed. Nothing serious, just a cold, probably. There was a collective inhale from half the room. The Velar twins dropped their pens. One of the Othak students made a low humming noise and slid 3 seats away. Professor Zoln tilted his head. Clarify. Your throat is damaged. Simon rubbed his neck. No, not damaged. It's just irritated. Happens all the time back home. Dry air, virus, whatever. Vek stood up so fast his chair fell backward. That's how it begins. The collapse of the central airway. Then the cervical collapse. Then liquefaction. What? Simon blinked. No, it's not like that. Tell them about mucus, a small, beetle-shaped student from the back shouted. Yeah, I've got some congestion, sure, Simon admitted. Gasps rippled through the room. A student near the front fainted. Another began chirping into a communicator. Professor Zoln looked genuinely concerned now. You are excreting fluid from your airway? It's not dangerous, Simon said quickly. It's just my immune system is doing its job. I'll be fine in a few days. Days? Vek whispered. You expect to survive for days? Simon groaned and dropped his head onto the desk. Within half an hour, he was escorted to the university infirmary by 2 security drones and a very nervous-looking student named Ref, who kept a constant 3-meter distance and refused to make eye contact. The infirmary was a cold, white place with walls that shimmered faintly under the artificial light. A medical assistant, a squat, 6-legged being named Nelka, scanned Simon with a device that looked suspiciously like a fruit juicer. Your vitals are within acceptable terrestrial ranges, Nelka said, squinting at the screen. But your vocal membranes are inflamed, and your temperature is slightly elevated. Yeah, Simon croaked. It's a sore throat. Another gasp. Nelka stepped back. You should not be speaking. I must consult the emergency protocol for Earth-based pathogens. No need for emergency anything, Simon said, trying to sit up. I just need some tea. Maybe some honey? Nelka stared at him. You intend to ingest a heated plant infusion as treatment? That's what tea is? You require assistance preparing this. Tea? Simon sighed. I'll do it myself. I just need hot water, a mug, and some tea bags. Got any chamomile? An hour later, Simon was back in his dormitory, sipping from a steaming cup of tea and wrapped in a blanket. He had barely taken 3 sips when the door buzzed. It slid open to reveal Ref, fidgeting and clutching a tablet. The Chancellor requests an update on your condition. Simon raised an eyebrow. The Chancellor? You are the first known case of pharyngeal inflammation on campus, Ref said. There is concern about contagion. We have locked down Wing 7. Simon set his tea down. You did what? Wing 7. The biology wing. Nobody in or out until we've completed decontamination. I told you it's not dangerous. Ref blinked. You said it was irritated and that you were congested. These are not signs of health. Simon pinched the bridge of his nose. Ref, I'm not dying. I'm not contagious. And tea helps. Ref looked down at the mug. May I observe this tea? Simon handed it over. Ref sniffed it, then cautiously dipped one finger. It is warm. That's kind of the point, Simon said. Ref looked stunned. You apply heat to internal tissues that are already inflamed? Well, yeah. The warmth soothes it. Ref sat down slowly on the edge of the bunk, staring at the tea like it was a grenade. This is not how our species handles inflammation. I'm starting to notice that. Ref looked up. Would you permit me to document this treatment? Simon chuckled weakly. Be my guest. The next day, Simon woke up to find 3 alien students waiting outside his door, each holding a mug of steaming liquid. Yek was among them, eyes wide and reverent. We have prepared plant-based infusions, Yek said. We wish to understand the ritual of heat ingestion. It's not a ritual, Simon said. It's just tea. The group followed him inside, arranging themselves in a semicircle as he demonstrated. Boil water. Pour over herbs. Steep. Sip. Try not to burn your tongue. Yek took a careful sip and immediately gagged. It is bitter. Yeah, that's the ginger. Good for your throat. Nelka arrived shortly afterward with a team of researchers. They had set up a mobile observation unit in the hallway. One of them had a clipboard. This is madness, Simon muttered. By the end of the day, he had explained the concept of a sore throat to 14 different species, each of which had wildly different interpretations of what constituted a medical emergency. One student insisted on scanning him every 10 minutes. Another offered to extract his entire throat and replace it with a synthetic one. No, Simon said for the 6th time that hour. I don't need a new throat. But you are in pain, the student insisted. I'm getting better. Humans recover. We just need rest and fluids. Word spread. Over the next few days, Simon's dorm became something of a pilgrimage site. Students came to observe the miraculous recovery of the human, as one campus news bulletin phrased it. He was interviewed. He was offered a research grant for his resilience. A professor asked if he'd be willing to undergo throat inflammation again for a controlled study. Nope, Simon said firmly. Once is enough. By the end of the week, Simon's sore throat had mostly faded and the university was still buzzing. Ref stopped by with a small container of dried herbs. I attempted to make my own blend, Ref said. Based on your descriptions. Simon opened the tin and sniffed. Smells like oregano and... Is that mint? Mint is cooling, yes? It may counteract the inflammation. Simon smiled. Thanks, Ref. I'll try it. As he sipped the experimental tea, Ref leaned forward. You truly believe this would pass naturally? Yeah, Simon said. Most of the time it does. Ref looked down at the mug. You humans are very strange. And you all overreacted. Ref gave a slow nod. Perhaps. But I still think liquefaction was a possibility. No, Simon said, sipping again. Definitely not. Outside, the hallway was crowded with students holding mugs and whispering in awe. The human had survived. He had faced inflammation and triumphed with tea. And Simon, throat finally returning to normal, leaned back against his bunk and laughed. By the time Simon stepped back into the university's communal dining hall 3 days after his brief exile, he was met with a level of attention usually reserved for heads of state or recently resurrected prophets. The room buzzed with quiet murmurs, and the moment he crossed the threshold, several sets of eyes segmented, or otherwise tracked him with the intensity of a predator sizing up a particularly confusing prey. He made it halfway to the hydration station before a lanky, red-skinned creature with glassy, lidless eyes intercepted him. It wore a vest that shimmered with embedded data screens, each pulsing with a soft green glow. You are Simon Velar, it said, its voice like someone dragging wet gravel across a floor. Still am, Simon said, reaching for a metal cup. I am Jinneth. I represent the Interdepartmental Committee for Health Anomalies and Procedural Gaps. We have questions. Simon filled his cup with something labeled neutral liquid 4 and took a sip. It tasted like over-filtered rainwater and old batteries. You're a little late. The sore throat's gone. We are aware. That is not the concern. Then what is? Jinnith extended one long arm and tapped at the display on its vest. A small hologram blinked to life between them. A line graph, jagged and angry. This represents the spike in student anxiety reports following your condition. There were over 900 documented cases of stress-induced thermoregulatory disruption. You created a phenomenon. I just drank tea and went to bed. You also refused synthetic intervention. You allowed your internal systems to self-correct. You consumed unapproved botanical liquids in unsupervised conditions. You rejected offered prosthetics. Are you trying to say being sick made me a security risk? We are trying to understand how your species sustains itself without mandatory cellular maintenance. Simon leaned against the counter. We've got immune systems. They learn. They adapt. They fight off infections. Jinnith tilted its head. An internalized, autonomous defense protocol? Yeah, that's what an immune system is. For how long has your species relied on this function? A couple 100,000 years. Jinnith blinked slowly. From the far table, a student with 3 necks and a translucent skull raised one of its hands. Did your throat regenerate? No, it just healed. Tissues repair themselves over time. How did you instruct your cells to do this? I didn't. They just know how. Several nearby students leaned in, furiously scribbling notes or tapping their data pads. One was muttering quietly into a recorder. Simon sighed and turned back to Jinnith. Can I just eat something? Your dietary preferences are currently under review. There are concerns about your ingestion of live bacterial cultures. You mean yogurt? Jinnith's eyes narrowed. You deliberately consume microbial organisms? They're good for digestion. There was a brief pause. Jinnith raised a hand and motioned to a pale creature near the wall who immediately began typing on a tablet the size of a cafeteria tray. Do you have any idea how many protocols you've unintentionally violated? Jinnith asked. Probably most of them, Simon said. But in my defense, I didn't come here to terrify people with dairy products. Your resistance to what others consider fatal is destabilizing. We've received requests from faculty to revise interspecies health classifications. Simon rubbed his temples. Look, I appreciate the concern, but I'm not a walking contagion vector. I got a sore throat. I drank hot stuff. I rested. That's it. The pale assistant approached and handed Jinnith a tablet. Jinnith studied it, then looked up. Would you consent to a voluntary adaptation audit? What does that mean? We would like to observe your responses to controlled environmental stressors, to understand the boundaries of your physiological tolerance. I'm not volunteering to be frozen, boiled, or irradiated. I'm still paying off student loans. No lethal conditions would be applied. Only discomfort thresholds. Simon narrowed his eyes. You want to poke me with unpleasant things to see what happens? You are remarkably calm discussing this. I'm from a planet where people voluntarily pour molten wax into their ears to clean them. Our standards for normal are flexible. Jinnith nodded once. We will forward you the consent forms. As Jinnith left, disappearing into a crowd of whispering students, Simon finally made it to a food dispenser. The interface blinked at him expectantly. He jabbed the button labeled human compatible and watched as a tray of beige cubes and a small bowl of overcooked rice slid into view. The cubes smelled faintly of cardboard and sadness. He turned to find Ref approaching, his gait unusually brisk. You have been summoned, Ref said. Simon lifted the bowl. Can I finish lunch first? It is not optional. He followed Ref out of the dining hall, past a group of students practicing what looked like synchronized sneezing. One of them waved. They took the lift to the 7th floor where the walls were darker and the lighting dimmed to a soft blue. Ref led him into a conference room with a single long table and a bank of screens lining the far wall. Inside were 4 individuals, none of whom Simon recognized. One had a face like a melted candle. Another resembled a bundle of vines wrapped around a central stalk. The third floated slightly above their seat, humming faintly. and the fourth looked almost human, except for the vertical pupils and skin that shimmered like a beetle's shell. Simon Velar, the vine being said. We are the Adverse Conditions Oversight Panel. The floating one gestured. Sit. Simon did. We have reviewed your unmediated recovery, said the beetle-skinned one. We consider it a potential resource. I'm not following. We are currently facing a biocontainment crisis on Vek Station. A pathogen that resists standard sterilization protocols is spreading among maintenance personnel. Symptoms include pharyngeal irritation, thermal imbalance, and mucosal overproduction. Simon blinked. You're saying they caught a cold? They are incapacitated, the candle face said. Simon leaned back. And you think I can help? We believe your exposure history and biological composition may provide insights. Or, at the very least, tolerance. I'm not immune to everything. I just survived a sore throat. That is more than the Vek personnel have managed. Simon crossed his arms. What exactly are you proposing? Travel to Vek Station. Remain in proximity to infected personnel. Report symptoms. If you do not succumb, provide samples. You want me to get sick on purpose? That's your plan. The vine figure rustled. Your resilience is an anomaly. We study anomalies. Simon exhaled. What's in it for me? The beetle-skinned one pressed a button. A screen lit up with a list of offers: tuition waiver, unrestricted lab access, private living quarters, and something labeled priority planetary exit rights. Simon stared at the list. You're offering me a spaceship ticket home in case of emergency? Among other things. He sat in silence for a moment. Fine, he said. But I'm bringing my own tea. The candle face passed him a datapad. Departure briefing in 12 hours. Report to Dock 15. As Simon left the room, Ref trailed a few steps behind. You are aware this is not a typical human experience, Ref said. I've started expecting that, Simon replied. They walked in silence for a while. What if you do become ill again? Ref asked. Then I'll do what I did last time. Ref stared at him. Drink hot plants. Exactly. Ref's eyes flicked down to his own notepad. Would peppermint be suitable for respiratory distress? Simon grinned. Now you're getting it. Simon hadn't expected Vek Station to smell like overripe bananas and melting plastic. But here he was. The docking bay hissed shut behind him with a sound like a vacuum cleaner giving up. The air was damp, warm, and oddly sweet. He adjusted the collar of his jacket, already regretting the thermal lining. A squat figure approached, its skin a pale lavender with folds like an unbaked croissant. It wore a badge that blinked the word operations in 3 languages. You're the human, it said. No greeting, no name, just a flat statement of biological fact. Simon Velar, he replied. You can just say hi, you know? The figure blinked, then turned and waddled down the corridor. Follow. You're late. I arrived exactly when the ship docked. Exactly late. They moved through hallways that curved in slow, lazy spirals as if the station had been designed by someone who distrusted straight lines. The walls glistened in places and faint vibrations hummed just underfoot. As they passed a cargo bay, Simon caught sight of a translucent being curled in the corner under a thermal sheet. It was coughing. Wet, wheezy, uneven. A cluster of others stood nearby, murmuring in hushed, clicking tones. The lavender figure didn't stop. That's the 10th today. Simon's stomach tightened. How many on the station? 682. 112 showing symptoms. 49 on leave. 6 in stasis. Why stasis? To keep them from drowning in their own secretions. Simon swallowed. Right. So where am I sleeping? The figure gestured at a door marked with a symbol that looked like a fork stabbing a jelly bean. Quarantine quarters. You're on observation. No physical contact. Meals are automated. Lavatory is coded to your biology. Cozy. You'll report for sampling in 2 hours. Blood, sputum, and breath. If you sneeze, document it. Am I allowed to blink without filling out paperwork? Only if it's symmetrical. The door slid open and then sealed behind him with an ominous thump. The room was small but clean, with a bed shaped like an open hand and a wall screen already displaying a rotating diagram of human lungs. A tray of packaged supplies sat waiting on the desk. Sterile masks, a thermometer, and a small packet labeled Earth Comfort Herbal Infusion Kit. Boil before use. Simon chuckled. At least someone remembered the tea. 2 hours later, he sat under a bright diagnostic light while a technician hovered nearby, holding a container that resembled a glowing pineapple. The technician had no visible eyes, just a smooth dome where a face might be. "Open your mouth," it instructed. Simon did. The pineapple beeped, then emitted a puff of steam. "What's that for?" "Thermal mapping of your uvula." "Excuse me?" "The dangling flesh." "I know what it is." "Why does it need mapping?" "To determine if the pathogen has altered its swing arc." "I don't think it works like that." The technician made a note. "We will compare your uvular behavior against baseline data." "You don't have baseline data on me." "We generated a model." Simon sighed. "Of course you did." The technician moved on to the next test, which involved placing a thin mesh cap on Simon's head and having him hum a single tone for 30 seconds. When the humming stopped, the cap vibrated once and detached itself. "Your vocal harmonics are within non-critical deviation. Glad to hear my hum isn't lethal. You may return to your quarters. If you begin to perspire from the forehead, summon medical staff." "That's just sweating. It is not universally benign." Back in his room, Simon brewed the tea. The station's water had a faint green tinge, but he figured boiling it would kill anything ambitious. The smell of chamomile filled the room, masking the plasticky sweetness of the recycled air. He sat on the edge of the bed, sipping carefully, and opened the terminal. A list of questions blinked on screen. "Have you experienced throat scratchiness since arrival? Have you experienced throat tightness since arrival? Have you experienced throat warmth since arrival?" He clicked no on all three, then paused at the next one. "Have you consumed any non-synthetic substances?" He clicked yes. A new window appeared. "Please describe." He typed tea. "Plant-based. Earth origin." There was a pause, then another prompt. "Has the tea altered your condition?" He typed no condition. "Tea is preventative." The screen buzzed once and closed. Later that day, a knock sounded at his door. He opened it to find a tall insectoid with delicate, shimmering wings folded against its back. Carried a shallow bowl filled with a murky liquid. "I was told you steep leaves in hot water. More or less. I have prepared a mixture using local foliage." Simon took the bowl and sniffed. It smelled like licorice and motor oil. "Appreciate the gesture, but I'll pass." "You do not trust our plants?" "I don't trust anything that smells like my uncle's garage." "I will document your refusal." The insectoid left, looking slightly offended. Simon closed the door and returned to his tea. By the third day, the station's medical logs showed a curious pattern. Simon, the only human, remained symptom-free. Meanwhile, the infection rate among other species continued to rise slowly but steadily. A meeting was called. Simon was summoned to the command deck, where 6 officials stood around a circular table, each with a personal air filter clipped under their nostrils, gills, or spiracles. "You remain asymptomatic," said one with a neck that pulsed faintly with every syllable. "Yes. Your room contains no advanced filtration, no biofoam insulation, no antimicrobial mist. Yet your biometrics are stable. I wash my hands. I sleep. I drink tea." The tallest one leaned forward. "You attribute your resistance to boiled leaves?" "That and not panicking." Another official tapped at a console. "We've analyzed your herbal infusion. It contains flavonoids, antioxidants, and volatile oils. Are these pharmacological agents?" "They're just plants. We've been using them for centuries. Not because they're magic. They just help the body do its job." "Your immune system," the pulsing-necked one said. "It adapts." "Yes, that's what it's for." They all looked at one another. The insectoid official from earlier stepped forward. "We would like to synthesize your response." "Meaning?" "We've mapped the active compounds in your tea. We propose distributing a reconstituted version to the infected. Simon raised an eyebrow. You want to give everyone herbal tea? If it promotes recovery, yes. Fine. But lose the motor oil plants. Within hours, the station's synthesizers were churning out thousands of small sachets labeled Human Infusion Thermal Protocol. Distribution began immediately. By the 5th day, reports showed a marked decrease in symptom severity among those who'd consumed the tea. Not a cure, but a comfort. In a place where comfort was rare, that mattered. Simon stood in the dining module, sipping from his mug as a line of crew members filed past the dispenser, each clutching their own. The air was still thick, but the tension had eased. Ref appeared beside him, slightly breathless. You're mentioned in 3 separate internal memos as a low-tech anomaly. Could have been worse. Could have been dangerous beverage propagator. They're revising pathogen response protocols to include non-synthetic countermeasures. Simon grinned. All because I caught a sore throat. Ref tilted his head and refused to panic. They stood in silence for a moment. A nearby crew member, her skin a deep violet, took a sip of tea and exhaled with something resembling relief. Tastes weird, she said. But I feel warmer. That's the point, Simon said. As the shift bell rang and the lights dimmed for rest cycle, Simon turned toward the corridor. His quarters weren't far. Coming? He asked. Ref hesitated, then followed. I'm thinking peppermint tomorrow, Simon said. Might keep things interesting. Ref nodded. As long as it doesn't smell like garages. No promises.